and welcome to another episode of the Laid Back Life podcast. We're talking about how to love life, entrepreneurship, and improve daily. Joining me, the queen of so many of those things, a guest who I think needs no introduction, but will get a great introduction because she deserves it. One of my favorite people, and okay, before I do the real bio, I want to share my favorite story of you. At CleoCon, I want to say like 2 years ago, you won a Lifetime Achievement Award. Was that the right term of it?
Yeah.
And it was so funny because you were so gracious. You're like, but also like I have so much more I want to do. And I think like, Carolyn's got this national law firm that fights big energy, blogged about law firm ownership for 25 years.
No, going on 23 in December.
23 years for myshingle.com, authored the book Solo by Choice, and since winning a Lifetime Achievement Award, has now also started training lawyers on using AI. So it was just so funny, you and where were we? Nashville, maybe? And you were just like, I'm not done yet. I'm like, and you're not. Like, this is, you are walking proof. So I love this.
Good. Yeah, no, I feel like I'm just getting started. I mean, we're in a whole new era.
Don't you wish though, like if I could take ChatGPT and just like send it back to me, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, like I'm just amazed at what would have been possible.
I think about that all the time. I feel like it would have changed the trajectory of my career because before I started my firm, I worked at a law firm and I was told I wasn't on partnership track. I always like to say I wasn't on associate track because as one of my colleagues or my bosses said, I never followed up. And the reason I didn't follow up was because the work was boring and it was hard and I just didn't want to do it. So I avoided it. But had AI been around, I would have followed up and I could have been a partner at an energy firm instead of doing everything I'm doing now. So
interesting.
I don't know how life would work out. But I think about that all the time if it had materialized at different parts of my career.
See, I thought you were going to say that for the opposite perspective, though. Because, so to me, AI is all about accessibility, right? It's taking this thing that used to take decades to learn how to edit video and design this. And, I could shoot a prompt in and get some, crazy picture. Or for the standpoint of, you as a solo fighting some of these big energy firms. I'm amazed at how AI is going to help David either take down Goliath or at least keep Goliath doing the right thing, because the AI can go through 50,000 boxes of data and scrape these emails and look for that smoking gun for all these defense firms, big corporations that were just like, hey, we're gonna, discovery dump things into submission.
Yeah, no, it definitely levels the playing field. And I just say that, the example I gave was a little bit in jest because I don't know that I would have used AI to take a conventional path. I think about if I had just, what if I had stayed at government for my whole career or
right.
Whatever I had done that. But there's so many different trajectories you can have when you think about, where it would have been available at what particular juncture.
So I think here's where I want to start, right? So ChatGPT 5 dropped last week, yesterday. Time has no meaning anymore. Very recently when we're filming this. So kind of walk me through the history of AI to where we are. And then I want to talk about how we use this.
So, I guess I remember it was launched in November of 2022. And of course, AI had been around for a long time before that. My late husband studied AI in the early 80s. And I found some of his papers. And one of the things that he was predicting or he was hoping to design was a AI program that would code along with a computer scientist. And of course, today, we have that, vibe coding and things like that. So yeah. 40 years later. But AI, in terms of being accessible, I guess everybody marks the start of that with the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022. And I guess the first couple of weeks, people just thought it was another novelty. Remember everybody running around making haikus and funny jokes and doing briefs in the style of Taylor Swift songs.
Well, I also think we kind of thought it was a Mechanical Turk, right? So there was this supposed to be automaton back in, I guess, the Turkish Empire. I don't know the history of this. The Ottoman Empire. I don't know
right.
And it was just some person in a box. Yes, and so I think for so long, people there's no way a computer could do this. They've got a million people in some other country giving me these answers back. And then at some point we're just no, this is the next thing. It's talking to us as if it's us.
Right. And to be fair, when it first launched, it really wasn't, I mean, it was still doing a lot of things, but it had, rampant hallucinations. It was making crazy assertions. And it just didn't, since November 2022, it's just amazing to see how it's evolved.
Well, of course, now it makes zero hallucinations. It's 100% accurate. You should trust it implicitly and let it write all your briefs and send in. No, just
Right. I know, just as much as you trust your law clerk to write those briefs.
yes, there. Thank you. That's a great analogy. Yes, like when another lawyer at the firm, when a non-lawyer does it, you double. Yes, I love that. And yes, everybody, I was kidding. Please
I
do not take
know.
the AI as gospel. Do not submit it. Do not tell them Jordan Ostrop told me it was right. We're making what I hope are jokes that are unnecessary, but become necessary every couple months when a lawyer gets punished for
So
putting in hallucinated cases.
I don't know how those hallucinations are happening. I mean, right before our call, I have something that I've got to go out of town later this week, and I have something I need to file before that. So I always, when I have something like that, I always set ChatGPT deep research on it before I do something. So I feel like I'm multitasking. And I looked at the result that I got, and it cited sources, it cited cases and utility commission decisions, and even TV interviews with different parties in the case that it dredged up. I mean, that's something that Lexis and Westlaw don't do.
Yeah.
Glancing over it, I mean, I looked at about 80% of the sources and I didn't see any mistakes. So I'm not sure where these I've gotten hallucinations in the past, but it's been a
Sure.
while since I've gotten them. So I don't know what
Good.
people are doing. I'd like to know where they come from, because if we can figure out how they occur, we can figure out how to fix them.
There we go. All right. So if you're listening to this or watching this, if you know where the hallucinations are from, if you've got some really bad ones, send them on over. Tag us. Let's dive in deeper. No,
Yeah.
I can't. So look, every one of my coaching clients has one of two problems. Either A, they don't have enough work, or B, they have too much work and not enough staff. And AI, I think, helps with both of them. So like the more we can help people use these things in the way that is right, I think the happiness everybody can find.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it takes that mental load off you too. I mean, if you can just start it working, even if it's working on a draft that you'll never use, you feel like something is getting done while you're doing something else. And then you have less stress and you can enjoy what you're doing and focus on, instead of being worrying about, oh, I got to start writing this thing, I got to start researching it. Because there's a mental load in addition to the actual workload, the work you have to do, and then the time you spend worrying about it.
Well, and before this was recorded, we were both joking. Both of us have done like 20+ hour drives in 3 days, and we were joking like because we know that AI and automation is running all the important stuff for the business behind it. It allowed us to just sit in a car and crush some audiobooks while traveling across the country.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't understand why more people aren't looking at that aspect of it. All you hear people talking about is the gloom and doom, how it's going to replace lawyers, and how there's these hallucinations, how they would never rely on it. How, I guess the one that I like the best is, oh, it will never replace me writing a will. I mean, of course it's going to replace, if you want, I mean,
Yeah.
other things you do besides write the will, you hopefully advise the clients, help them with planning, help them with other issues. I mean, hopefully you're doing more than just drafting something. But I mean, you always hear the downside. You don't hear all the positives that it can bring, the positive changes.
What positive changes are you seeing?
Well, some of the ones you've talked about, I mean, I have a friend who she would never visit a therapist. She's just not that type of person. She doesn't like to unload her problems even on me. And I'm like one of her closest friends from law school. But she uses Gemini all the time just to talk to as a therapist. And so in her situation, and of course she doesn't, obviously in a situation where you're seriously suicidal or have very serious mental health issues, this is something you wouldn't want to do. But for somebody who's just kind of stressed out, who really, you know, in 60 years has never visited a therapist, this is something that, really makes her life a little bit easier. And that's just, one type of example that I've seen.
Well, and like I said, so we recorded this beginning of August. ChatGPT 5 just dropped, and when it initially dropped, they got rid of the other modules, and there were like thousands of people that made that same post. Like, hey, what'd you do with 4.0? Like that was my therapist, that was my friend, that was my work buddy, and they actually like rolled it back to allow people to have access to it just based upon like the kind nature of it. I don't know if that's the right.
That is so funny, because I also do use it for therapy. And ChatGPT 4 definitely had a different vibe than 5. I hadn't had a chance to Google it, but it was much more chummy and supportive. And ChatGPT 5 is, I mean, it gives the same reasoning, but it's more clinical, and it always ends things with, and how can I help you? And what can I do? So I guess that's stereotypically, that's typically what a guy would do. Like people always if you read books like Deborah Tannen's book on, I can't remember what it was called, about like gender communications. And she always said, like, when men give advice, they always want to be helpful and proactive. So they'll always suggest, you know, if their wife is complaining about something, they say, well, why don't you try this, or why don't you build this? And women just kind of empathize. And so I think the ChatGPT 4 was more empathetic, and the 5 is more like the suggester. But I mean, I don't find anything wrong with both of them, but I did miss 4, and I didn't realize it was a common phenomenon. I didn't know that. Wow.
Well, and so for Max Law Conference in 2 months, I get to be on a panel with my wife about working with your wife. And I want to make sure I bring up this example because there are so many. My wife will be talking about something. I was like, are you talking to husband Jordan? Are you talking to friend Jordan? Are you talking to business partner Jordan? Are you like, what role, treat me like an AI. What role do you want me to play? You know, what answer are you looking for here? So yeah, it's just fascinating. It's interesting. I didn't think about it from the gender dynamics, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that book. It came out a long time ago, so
that's okay.
Yeah.
So for anybody who hasn't used AI yet, mind you, I don't think those people are listening or watching this, but hypothetically, where would you suggest somebody start now? You know, we're in August 2025.
I guess if they're attorneys, I would just start with something low rent, like feed them a copy of your resume and tell them to update your resume, or show them a copy of your website and ask them to improve it or make it more searchable. I would start with like low end things like that and just see what it can do. And, you know, not give it that many instructions, not try to get like a master prompt for it, and just start talking to it and feeling at ease with it and just experimenting like that. And then I would do longer things, like maybe have it respond to an email. I would also really practice dictating with it, because that's something I really noticed. I don't know if this is the case for you, but with me, I talked to it a lot, and I was never a dictator. I was always, well, I was never a dictator, a dictation person.
I know what you meant both those things, though.
Yes. I was always a writer, and so I always wrote things, and I never did dictation because my thoughts are all over the place, and when I would do it, it never saved me time because there were all these sentence fragments that had to be cleaned up. But ChatGPT and AI understand that, and so I find that giving instructions as I would to a law clerk sitting in my office or sitting on Zoom, you know, telling them what to do and going through a list of things, works better and is much faster. And I feel like I can give it more precision when I give the directions like that. So I would also practice talking to it, because I think we're going to see a lot more of a transition between writing work and dictation and speaking.
Yeah, it was interesting. Microsoft released the 40 jobs they think are most at risk. Book editor was one of them, I think, for exactly what you're talking about, like the ability to just like verbally dump a bunch of stuff and get back like a newsletter, a chapter of a book, you know, a well thought out 5-paragraph essay. Like, it's amazing to me the way that it connects the dots of my thought into human formatting. I don't know, grammar, whatever we want to talk about.
So I think that also can make people feel comfortable, because when you're dictating it, you're still having input, and that your input gives you control. And so you see that the output reflects your input, and then you feel more comfortable. And if you have that kind of cheater complex where you feel like you're using AI as cheating, you see that it's not cheating. You see that it's giving a result that reflects your thoughts and your originality and creativity and perspective and strategy. So I think that talking to it makes it more accessible and makes people more comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, and I like you mentioned, you know, your voice. So one of the things that I do is I carve out like 30 or 60 minutes every week, and I will go for a walk. I'll turn on the voice function of ChatGPT. I'll be like, what don't you know about me? What questions do you have about me? What can I answer so that you will give me better results? And it's like, I had ChatGPT write me jokes. It nailed, like, it was Jordan, you know, my favorite one, it was like, you want my best personal branding advice? Wear a Hawaiian shirt. Half the people will think that you're totally checked out on vacation. The other half will think you're so successful you no longer care. But either way, nobody bothers you. And I was like, that's me. Oh my God.
Is you. That's
that
why
is me in a nutshell.
I say.
Yeah, you know? It was great. It was shockingly funny because it was accurate
Yeah.
from a lot of those conversations. And I think that feels so much more natural than like, hey, fill out this super long form online and tell us about, fill out this personality test. And like, let's just, have a conversation with the AI.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the best way to get to know it and have it get to know you.
So for the attorneys, or any business owner, but the attorneys that you're working with that are using this in the most like positive way. I know you mentioned like if you're starting now, build up, but like where do you see people growing this to? What are people doing now to maximize AI from an efficiency standpoint, from a happiness standpoint, from an enjoyment standpoint?
I think one of the most exciting things I see people doing is training AI on their documents and their templates and their knowledge or database, and then sharing that with clients through links so that clients can access their knowledge. And I think that helps in so many ways. First of all, attorneys can get overwhelmed if you're always interrupted with calls from clients. That can really cause stress or interfere with your workload. And then it also helps educate clients, and it makes them more independent, and it gives them access to resources that you've developed. So I think that's one of the most exciting things I've seen, is using it to share knowledge with clients, and it addresses all of those points you mentioned. I think also just using it to do kind of the legal adjacent work like marketing and responding to RFPs if you're in that line of business, or just doing short emails. I think it takes the stress out. A lot of times you get like a nasty gram from opposing counsel, and it's not that it's hard to respond to. It's that first you have to talk yourself off the ledge, and then you have to think, oh, I've got to deal with this, and I don't want to deal with it now. And so it either sits in your box for 2 weeks, or you send something off that you really shouldn't have sent. You just let ChatGPT or AI, Claude, whichever one you're using, Gemini, do that. And I think that's really saving people a lot of hassle too, just the mental energy and the avoidance. And I think that's really going to make legal practice a little bit more civil too.
It's so funny you mentioned that. So I was telling Carolyn before this, on my road trip, I listened to two books about the Civil War, and it talks about Abraham Lincoln would write these like really angry letters to his cabinet, to generals, when they lost battles, and then he would just never send them, just like put them in the desk and be done with it. So like I've started doing that with like, how dare you? This is the worst. This is a scam. Blah blah. And then I'm like, ChatGPT, turn this into an email that like is nice, is kind. It can be read in court, whatever. And it will be like, I feel that while I don't understand everything you did here, I know that most people try to do what they're right and whatever. And I was like, it sounds like me being super nice. It did when I like needed to vent the frustration at whatever situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was an attorney that got punished for telling his opposing counsels to eat a bag of male
Oh,
reproductive organs. Like it was that was in the report. He sent them an email that
whoa.
said it. That was in his punishment. Like, hey, ChatGPT, like, don't let me send any emails that include the following words. Like it would be amazing what we can do.
Yeah. No, so those are two of the things. I mean, I know that people, it's funny too, it's hard to get an answer from people on how they're using it, because I think there is still a sense of embarrassment or shame when you're using it for brief writing and for more substantive work. And I don't know why people are embarrassed. I mean, it gets the work done faster. I know a lot of attorneys are using it for discovery. Discovery, I mean, it's a repetitive, kind of boring task. It's very tedious. So I think using it for that gets, people are kind of willing to admit that, because discovery is often handled by paralegals or legal assistants. And so if you're delegating it to ChatGPT, you don't have that same shame factor. But I think a lot of attorneys are using it more than they let on. And I don't know why, because why not say that the AI did it? Who cares? If it's a good brief, it's a good brief. Who cares who wrote
Right. I don't know. I
it?
Funny. I was gonna, in the middle of your previous statement, I was gonna ask you, why do you think that is, but then you went right into the I don't know. I, it's one of those things, and even I was mentioned, we have the episode with Mike Whalen. We talked about how it's like impacting human connection in a negative way. But like even in that situation, he's like, but we have to use this. Like unless everyone agrees not to use it, like you need it to stay up to speed. So
Yes.
it's just weird that everybody's like still trying to brag about how overworked they are and unwilling to admit where they had help from automation, AI, technology, machine learning, whatever it is. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know why that is.
No, I don't. And it looks out of touch. I mean, if somebody says, here's this brief, it took me 25 hours to write it, I'm not going to be impressed with that if it's something that AI could have done in a few hours. Now, depending on the flourishes and the reasoning and things behind it, maybe it becomes more impressive. It's a really unique issue. I have found that I haven't found it to be super good in situations where I'm trying to make a novel argument or an argument of first impression. And you really, even when I direct it, it does the same thing a first year lawyer does. You know how you always say, this is clearly the argument to make, or clearly it's this way, and or it's very obvious, and that when you're
Right.
using those crutch words, that your argument is not so clear, not so obvious, and that's what ChatGPT and Claude do when you're asking them to make an argument of first impression. They think if they use those adverbs, that it just makes it a stronger argument. So they act in a very human way, but it's not a helpful way.
But ultimately, like, that's so much of what the law is, right? Like, I think of George Carlin had the thing, right? Like, say your own words. And he's like, if I said it in my own words, no one would understand it because we agreed upon these words. So, like, we have this precedent, but here's where it's different. Here's the next step. Here's, I just think, to me, it's fascinating if you use it to put you in the position to spend more time being that artist, being that expert, having that novel. If it'll take 80% of the brief and have it done, so you can spend 10 times as much time on that novel argument that's 20% of the brief, like, that's a great use of everybody's time, I think.
Exactly. And that's what helps advance the law. I mean, when you think of all these arguments out there that never get pushed because people don't have money for it, or people don't have the time to really sit through and go through all the different potential iterations. I mean, it's exciting because we're going to see all these new legal developments, these novel advancements that arise because people have the time to focus on that, because they can get the grunty stuff or the regular routine stuff out of the way. So I think that's a great use of AI to the benefit of the public.
Now, for the firm owners that you're talking about here, is there a fine line between, like, AI for business and AI for life? Are you seeing people blur that line? Like, how does that play into this conversation?
That's an interesting question. I think at Big Law, I think the way that it's being used, I think at Big Law, they use a lot of tools like Harvey and Westlaw Precision, or whatever Westlaw and Lexis are calling their 87 different products these days.
Right.
And so I think there it's something that is viewed as very separate. I think for solo and small firm owners who are using more off-the-shelf products, there is kind of an overlap. I know in my own use, I go back and forth between asking it to draft a brief to coming up with a recipe to cook for dinner. It's very fluid, and that's really how your day goes, right? I mean, you do some work and then you talk on the phone to your spouse, or you make a call to book an airline. And so your chats and your thread should look like that. And I think that's more typical use for many solo and small firm owners who are using the off-the-shelf products, because I don't think you can ask Westlaw Precision how to make a lasagna.
Like, there's this case site. Oh, there was, what was it, like, there's that judge that got upset so they cited every single word in one of the briefs. Like, I'm sure there's some footnote out there about a lasagna recipe or something. But yeah, I mean, what are the pros and cons of those two different approaches, though? Like, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, what's for the firms that have a very specific program for the business versus using a Claude, a ChatGPT, a Grok for everything? Like, where are you going to see benefit, and where is that going to be to our detriment?
So I think now, and I haven't tested all of the Big Law products because I just don't have access. They don't give free demos. They're not like Google where you can, or, some online technology where you can just go and test it openly and give your credit card. So I don't know, but from what I gather, they're very specialized. And I think now they probably, for very sophisticated work, they probably still have an edge because they have access to a whole, not just to the court libraries, but to regulatory agencies, to, Edgar and SEC databases. And so I think they probably have an edge on the legal issues. Now, I don't know whether that's always going to be like that because, I've noticed that ChatGPT, at least the deep research tools, and Gemini are starting to crawl a lot of the agency websites where I get, where I track decisions. So I think ultimately that's a con. And this is something I've noticed kind of over the course of my career. When you do research, I was always like having to log into Lexis to find the cases and then going on Google or Wikipedia to get background information. And no, I wasn't going to cite that in my brief, but it's just helpful sometimes. You need a shortcut, you just need like a cliff notes of a particular issue. And it was very frustrating to have to go back and forth like that because it wasn't seamless. And so I think that ultimately, as ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whichever platform gets better, you're going to have access to that whole that whole range of resources, both legal research and maybe, like I said, the ChatGPT deep research. It was finding television interviews with people who were involved in the case. I mean, that's the kind of thing that could be relevant in a brief that kind of, fills in the gaps. And so I think ultimately that's the better approach, is to have the open approach where you have access to all the cases and secondary and tertiary and all kinds of, background material, because it just makes the research experience more seamless.
Well, and it's fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to date myself, right? Like, I remember going into the law library, and then there were the supplements at the back of the books, right?
You remember that? I didn't know you were that
old. Yeah. thank you. I'm gonna take this compliment. I never had to use it, but it was like in the library. I remember thinking, like, somewhere out there is a case that was decided because one side got the supplement and one side didn't, or they got it faster or whatever. And so now, like, it's interesting, you're taking that same, the supplements now into the SEC filings, now into like local, orders and trial court hearings, whatever. Like, having access to that information faster levels the playing field so much versus like a pay for play model for, who could pay more, the, Bloomberg terminals, right? Who could pay $25,000 at the time to get stock information 4 minutes faster. That was had a ton of value before, and this has balanced so much of that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it changes it's going to change even the way that law is taught, because in law school, you always learn law in the vacuum. You learn what the case is and, what the legal issues are, but you don't study the greater context and, think about other factors that might have resulted in a particular decision. So right. I think that was something that always bothered me in law school, was never having the backstory, never knowing, what might make a particular party sympathetic, or, why a particular case was decided a particular way. But yeah, no, it's I think ultimately it's going to make for better decisions with more information, and again, resolve a lot of issues that maybe have been left unresolved before.
So I think you'd mentioned like that a con of some of the more specific programs is that they might lose access or not be, learning from some of the background interviews and that kind of stuff. For a, solo small to medium sized firm, what should they be analyzing to see if it's worth it to add on one of those more specific programs versus just sticking with hopefully an upgraded account at, ChatGPT or Claude or whatnot?
Yeah, I think a lot is going to have to do with how much case law research you need, because as good as these programs are, I don't think they're doing a systematic review of case law, and they have access to some cases, whatever is in the court listener library, the Google libraries, libraries that are online. So if you have any kind of practice that requires you to access case law, I think you kind of have to suck it up and just buy one of those systems to just get the key to the library, so to speak. And again, that's something that may change in a few years, which is another thing that bothers me about those commercial services, is they really want to lock you in for 3 and 5 year contracts, which at this time is just insane. So I would also advise to try to get the best deal with the shortest lock-in that you can, because you never know when things will change.
In terms of programs, in terms of
ChatGPT and other programs being able to access case law. I see. Yeah, and with all this talk about agentic AI, there's at some point, I'm going to be able to tell the AI, go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission website and do a search there and then pull the cases for me. If it can really act as, right now it can't do that because the site is locked, and it also requires multiple steps and not everything at the site is indexed. But if AI agents become a thing, and they are becoming more powerful, and everybody's always saying they're the next big thing, but they're still falling short. But once AI gets agents, there's no reason why they can't crawl some of the sites themselves, maybe even crawl Pacer. So that's another thing that could change and could give people access to the kinds of cases they need, or crawl state court cases which for a
Yeah.
lot of solos and smalls who are just doing like family law or probate cases, you really need access to a good state superior court or district court and appellate court level case law. You don't really need access to PACE or anything like that. And that's what people rely on things like Lexis and Westlaw for now. But as that becomes more accessible, you know, the regular general use platforms can get that stuff for you.
I also think it'd be interesting, not just access or no access, but you submit a brief, the judge has 30 days to review it before making a decision. There's 10 days to accept it or appeal it, whatever the timeline is. Having it stay on top of if anything has changed over that time frame automatically. So instead of you being like, all right, I need to sit down for 5 hours to get this brief done, but then also be like, all right, I have 30 more days before it has to be submitted. Like, are there any updates? Okay, the judge hasn't signed it yet. Are there any updates? You know, like from other cases, just having this, knowing enough about the situation to know what other cases came out that might change or impact the opinion in your current case.
Yeah, no, that's a great use. That's something I was thinking about before, is just being able to update all that material like as it happens. So, and I think that the tools, the general consumer tools, are really better positioned for that. I think their agents are more powerful than, you know, what the commercial tools have now. But I guess, you know, a commercial tool could certainly adopt something like that too. But yeah, no, then you get more accurate decisions that are based on current case law rather than, you know, case law that's been outdated as soon as the order issues.
Well, and it'd be so funny for me if they're like ChatGPT is like, hey, now we have access to Pacer and all these other things, and then DeepSeek is like, and now we have access to everybody's TikTok. You know, like just hey, if you're gonna fight over here, like we're gonna take the if you're gonna go more upstream analytical whatever, we're gonna go downstream and see where we can add things. I
Yeah,
just it's a wild time to be alive.
it is. It's so exciting. I am so grateful to still be practicing at this time because this is not something I would want to miss. There's just so much possibility. It's just crazy, crazy stuff.
But I'm curious. I obviously I agree with you, but like I have to imagine you have colleagues who are just like, meh, you know, I don't have enough time left for it to be worth it. Like I'm just it's somebody else's problem. I'll be out in you know whatever. I've got my 1 year, 3 year, 5 year window. Have you come across people like that?
Yeah, but that's how they've kind of spent their whole career, you know.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's a
So,
fair.
yeah, yeah. I don't. That's I don't gravitate towards people like that. I'll put it that way. So I don't know that many because they probably don't gravitate towards me either.
There we go. They're like, she's gonna make us care and be interested in what's going on now. We can't live in the past. Find
Right.
other people. So I want to talk. You know, we talked about business, especially law. I want to talk a little bit more life in the next, you know, the 10, 15 minutes we have left. How are you seeing people use this from to live a better life, and what's best practice there?
I mean, I think people are using it for all kinds of things, to plan trip itineraries, to identify places where they might want to go on a vacation, to get things like recipes, to get advice about what to do in a particular situation. You know, at the family dinner, somebody makes a racist comment, what's the best way to respond? Those kinds of questions. I mean, again, people are using it for therapy. People are using it just for so many things. To just get those kinds of reactions or those kinds of answers. And it makes life easier, and it gives you a whole bunch of different perspectives to consider. You don't necessarily have to follow them, but sometimes it can be really helpful.
So I want to that first one. I think is a great example, right? The travel, and there are multiple different ways to travel, right? Like I'm married into a family that's like, let's go run a 5K on Thanksgiving morning, and I'm more of like, I want to get my 10,000 steps, but I also want to spend some time on the couch. How do you? What steps do you see people taking to get ChatGPT to create not just a great vacation, but a great vacation for them? Like, how do they get that personalization into the AI?
I think you just give it a lot of information about, you know, where you are and what you're doing. When I was driving back from Minnesota, I needed to find places to stop along the way, but I didn't want to book too far in advance in case I was feeling energetic and could get in like, you know, 4 more hours. I didn't want to have a booking, you know, 4 hours east. So I would tell it things like, I want to stop. I want it to be right off the highway. I want it to be 3 hours from my home. I want it to be in a safe area. I want the price range to be this, and it would come back with recommendations that were very helpful that my GPS couldn't really find, or it was harder to figure out how to get my GPS to find something 4 hours down the road.
I totally agree. So was it 100% correct? Was it 90% accurate? Like how dialed in was this?
It was generally accurate. At one point, it gave me a recommendation. I told it that I wanted to do at least 5 hours in a particular day, and it gave me a recommendation that was just 4 hours away. So I scolded it and I said, I want to go more than 4 hours. And so it did give me a good recommendation. I was thinking of when I was leaving Minnesota, I wanted to stop outside of Chicago. And I remember having passed the city of Rockford, which was probably like 5 or 6 hours from Minneapolis, but it wasn't that close to Chicago. So I asked it for something between Rockford and Chicago, and it came up with Elgin, which was actually perfect because that put me like right 20 miles out of Chicago to start the next day. And that's something I wouldn't have thought of. So there it was like right on point when I asked it directed questions. But before that, it was like telling me to stop in Madison, Wisconsin, which was too far west. And so I
Got
had to
it.
give it a little bit more detail about what exactly I was considering.
Well, so my not lifelong dream, because it's not nearly that serious. The thing I've always wanted. So like I don't drink that often. So there are all these like the best happy hours in every city, but they're also alcohol focused. I was like, I want to try the menu. I want the sliders, the happy hour food stuff. And so finally one day, when deep research first came out, I was like, give me every food special for either a lunch special or a happy hour special in Orlando. And by no means was it 100% accurate. It was probably 60, 70% accurate. But oh my gosh, in a half an hour, it put together enough of a list that I had been thinking in my head for like 5 years and didn't put anything together. So even in some of those situations where you had to give it the Rockford or something, like it's just amazing to me how much closer it gets you to what you want with a
Yeah,
little bit more prompting versus starting from scratch.
right. And it's weird that people would complain because you're still, like you said, you're still closer to what you want than you were without it. So why complain about it? Just figure out ways to make it listen to you. And it's going to continue improving too. I bet if you did that search now, it might come out a little bit differently, the results.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, there was one. It was like Cecile's Bar, and it was like this place doesn't exist, but a place like this might offer a really good, Wednesday wings special. And I was like, all right, but like ones that actually exist, or it'd be like, oh, it was a place that closed down 4 months earlier. It was a special that had expired at the previous month. I'm like, all right, I get it. Like it was something I never would have spent my time on, the depth it went, and I never would have paid somebody else the time it took to get that deep in 30 minutes of the AI for whatever, 1/1000th of the $20 increase cost of ChatGPT Plus or Pro or whatever it's called.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing too. It does these things that you would never just do on your own on a lark. It's just not worth your time. That's the cool thing too, because it's so additive that way. It's giving you more. It's giving you things you wouldn't have done. And theoretically you could have done it, but you want to spend the time on it.
Well, and what's you mentioned, agentic AI, and what's wild to me is we're not even in agent 1.0 zone, right? Like we keep saying we are, but it's not. So like agent 5.0 zone where it acts like an employee, right? Where it brings information to the table you didn't even think to ask because you gave it enough of a task to do that. Like I'm so weirded out by the benefit of that versus still like having free will. So like how do we walk this line? How do the AI is picking where to stay, but you're giving it the right parameters? Like, is that the way to do it?
I mean, that's something that I'm very comfortable with. I don't like ceding control 100%, especially because I have seen it make some mistakes. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's what gives me control. And I think it's going to be individual for anybody. I could easily, my husband used to always say when I would get lost on the GPS, he'd say, you've got to give yourself over 100%. You cannot waver. You have to give yourself 100% over to the GPS. It'll never do you wrong. Of course, it might take you like on a 2 hour jaunt and a frolic, but it'll get you to your destination. And so I think people have different levels of comfort, and some people might feel very comfortable giving up 100% of control, and other people are going to be control freaks, and other people are not even going to ask the question. But I think that's going to be a personal decision. I don't think there's going to be any kind of set way that you would go about
Yeah.
figuring it out.
Well, and so the conversation my wife and I have is I am of the belief there is a if the AI could 90% guarantee me that if I just followed what it did, I would be not 10% happier, not 40% happier. Like there's some number. I don't know what that number is. But like there comes a point where I would make the decision to give up a lot of my decision making if I was that certain of that much better. My wife is completely against it. So like she's the rational one in our family probably. I think but I love what you said. Like everybody needs to figure out their comfort level with amount of control.
Yeah, no, and my daughters, surprisingly, my daughters are 25 and 28, and they're both in math. So they're obviously, sort of like tech or what is it, left brain or right? I don't know which side of the brain that is, but they don't like relying on it that much, especially to do math. They really
Yeah.
they don't like it for that. So they'll use it for completely recreational things, but they don't like seeing and they're both in education. They don't like seeing their students use it for writing. They're very much opposed to that. But yeah, so it's not even the comfort zone isn't even necessarily age dependent. It's just, kind of the way your brain works and what you feel comfortable with.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned the way your brain works because like they had that Stanford study that found that like the people that use it are remembering nothing and it's not helping. But at the same time, like the people that don't enjoy learning the way we've done it for the last 200 years to make us all future factory workers, like the opportunity to create your own curriculum, create your own course, like finding that spark of enjoyment in education, I think ChatGPT makes so much easier. And that's the study I want to see. Like, if you created your own curriculum on something you were genuinely enjoying, would you still remember nothing? I think it's because they forced people to write this paper that they were okay with remembering none of it because they didn't want to do it to begin with.
Yeah, no, I always think it could have been so helpful to be a tutor because, to just like for some of the science classes I took, it just would have helped explain things differently, or I could have just kept asking it questions until I understood things. I mean, sometimes people go to it explicitly to understand, not just to get the answer. I mean, I know there are people who are to
Yes.
get the answers, but I,
Yeah.
I would use it that way.
Well, and I like it. I love it for analogies. So, like, my wife and I will be having some intricate legal conversation, and then like our 7-year-old will be like, "Hey, explain res judicata to me, whatever." There was one. We were talking about Parkinson's law. I don't remember how it came up, but in essence, like work expands to fill the time allotted, so compress it. I'm trying to explain this to him. Finally, I go to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was like, "The same fart is smellier in a smaller room." That was its Parkinson's law explanation to my 7-year-old, and he just got it. He's like, "Oh, got it. Okay, cool." Like it's never would I have thought about that, but I'm cracking up. You're cracking up. He was cracking up, and it's stuff. So like in
Yes.
those situations, if you're not just trying to get the answer, but having it help you figure out how to understand the answer, I think there's so much opportunity for this.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like I said, just amazing.
All right, so we've reached the last like 5 or so minutes. I want you to like call your shot, right? Like, where do you see this going in the next 6 months, a year, 5 years? Like, pick whatever timeline. Like, I'm curious where you see all this AI growth headed.
It's always hard to do these predictions, but I see, and this is something I've been reading about. I think Ryan McKean writes about this a lot, about the kind of competition between the general purpose use cases and the legal commercial uses, and if one is going to overtake the other. And I think within a year, we're going to have more of an answer on that. And I think we are going to see a lot of these general purpose platforms being used. I think we might also see some detrimental responses to that. I think we might see a lot of people like ethics regulators and other attorneys and maybe legal tech companies calling out some of these platforms and saying, oh, they're not secure. They don't protect client confidential information. They're not covered by attorney-client privilege, to kind of create an artificial barrier to using these sites. And that's a fight that I'm already gearing up for. So preparing to do
Interesting.
research on that, because I mean, we've been down that road before. I mean, the reason we don't have access to cases is because of the whole Lexis duopoly and courts giving Westlaw and Lexis access to case pipeline starting a century ago. So I really hate to see things go in that direction. But I do think that we will see more lawyers, well, in a year, will more lawyers adopt? It's hard to say. I think the lawyers who are using it are going to continue to use it more and really double down. And so I think the lawyers who are using it, you're going to see significant advantages. And I think we're also going to see them putting out tools to help clients that, make it easier for clients to get information and kind of have developed more client-focused applications and uses. So I think we'll see that from the firms that are adopting. But I think in a year, I don't think that's going to be enough time. I don't think you're going to see, 100% adoption rate amongst law firms. And I think finally you'll also see, people starting to rethink their practice model. I'm seeing it in my own practice myself. When I can do work faster, I don't do all my cases flat fee. Some of them are hourly, and it takes less time. I have more time on my hands. I'm looking for new things to do because it doesn't take as much time. And so I think people who have volume practices they can just ramp up the volume. I think if you have a practice like mine, you have to think about what types of cases you're able to take. Maybe you can take more cases that people previously couldn't afford to bring, but I think it's going to also make people rethink how they practice because it is a time saver. I can see that. I'm like the canary in the coal mine. If big law firms are still charging the rates that they charge and they're not doing more issues, then they're lying because if they're using AI, because it's faster. And I was always fast. I could bang out a motion pretty quickly, but it's faster than I am. So,
well, or they're ostriching, right? They're willfully ignorant. I think that's our legal term. Yeah, and it's fascinating because I think we hear it so often from the sky is falling perspective, right? From like, you can't afford to go hourly. But I love that you're talking about the access to justice side, like being able to take some of these cases where the client couldn't afford to pay you hourly or the time being there to be able to handle the case. I think that's a fascinating opportunity to like shed more light on some terrible things that are going on, but are difficult to uncover being done through AI.
And that's something we really never had the ability to do. We had the ability to handle simpler cases. You could come up with automation programs that would automate, consumer debt cases or opposition to consumer debt, or maybe simple family law cases like uncontested divorces. But we never really had the tools that would allow for, more sophisticated litigation or for challenging appeals or things like that. And it's going to be exciting to see where that goes. And I hope it goes in the right direction.
That or Skynet, one of the two, access to justice or robot overlords.
Yes.
Right. So as we get towards the end, look, I think you are a guest that should need no introduction. I assume everybody listening knows who you are, follows you. But for anybody who doesn't, what's the best way for them to get in touch? And then I don't know if you have anything going on. I know you had a couple months ago, you had a nice conference helping people learn AI, doing it in the moment, seeing it be done. It was really cool setup that you had.
Yeah, so people can follow me, Carolyn Elefant. You can follow me on LinkedIn under Carolyn Elefant or at my blog, myshingle.com. We did have I hosted a teach-in at the end of June, which had 23 practitioners who were all showing different ways that they used AI. And what was really fun about the webinar that we did, first of all, it was 5 hours, and a lot of people sat for 5 hours, which is crazy. But there's also a whole different array of AI tools. So there's like Google Notebook LLM, Gemini, Claude, all of the different tools. And if you go to my LinkedIn bio, you can buy it for $77. You can buy the recordings. They're still available. They're still current. I'll have to pull them in another month or two because they'll lose their shelf life. But they're still pretty much up to date now. So if anybody wants kind of a sampler and an overview of how other practicing attorneys are using these tools, each segment is about 10 or 15 minutes, so you can just look at one or two each day. It's not too overwhelming.
Well, and you had some phenomenal guests on totally different takes. There was Dan got really granular with some stuff, and then I think it was Laura Cowan had the how to get AI to recommend you to people and stuff. Like it was a good cross section.
Yeah, it was marketing, it was substantive work, it was really everything. So it was really interesting.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened. We'll see you back here next week for next week's episode. But in the meantime, if you haven't used AI, now is the time, right? The Chinese proverb, best time to plant a tree 10 years ago, second best time right now. And Carolyn gave you some pretty good ways to get comfortable with it going forward. But again, like, don't overextend yourself, but stay on top of this because it's getting faster at light speed. And the sooner you understand enough of it, the easier it is to stay up to date as everything happens.
That's right.